Hello, this is John Wasik, author of Lightning Strikes, and you're listening to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast. I'm your host, Nate Goss. For this podcast episode, we have a special treat for you because today we have the library's head honcho, big cheese, chief, commander, or if you prefer the more formal nomenclature, library director David Archer. He's back again to give us an exclusive update on the Aspen Drive Library expansion project, which broke ground just last February and is well underway, as any visitor to the library can attest to. Now, we did a podcast episode back in February when the project first began, but a lot has happened since then, so we figured it was time to check back in. So, Dave, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here.
So, again, as I just mentioned, the last time we spoke, it was really kind of at the beginning stages as far as at least when the construction project was taking off. A lot's happened. Could you maybe just do a quick recap of what the construction project is, maybe for those who either didn't listen to that last episode or haven't really been keeping up with the project, and also where we're at with the project?
Sure, of course. So the project itself is a $6.8 million project that adds 15,000 square feet to the Aspen site. So the Aspen location currently has 20,000 square feet. It was a small building to begin with, but it was within what the library district could afford at the time. Mm-hmm. We knew we would have to expand. So this expansion is designed to address a number of priorities that have been identified over the past few years. One of which, and primarily is the biggest need, is a dedicated children's space. Mm-hmm. The current Aspen building, for our visitors who go there, is in an open area along with all the other services of the library.
Right.
And it can get a little bit active and noisy, but in a good way.
More of a kid's corner.
It is a kid's corner, but that space is shared with everyone else. So a dedicated children's area was a top priority. We wanted to have a relocated and expanded quiet reading area, a quiet study area, if you will. With study rooms being in high demand at that location, we wanted additional study rooms there, so we'll be going from 2 to 6 study rooms. We wanted a dedicated area for our high school students, as well as additional space for our after-school students who visit us during the school year. A maker space, and then finally an enlarged digital studio with a recording booth. The cost of this project, roughly a third of that $6.8 million, will come from our accumulated reserves that the board has set aside over the years, and the remaining will be debt paid off over the next 20 years, paid out of the library's operating budget annually. So the 15,000 square foot wing will have a finished space on the main level of 7,500 square feet for the children's area, and then an unfinished basement for future use and current storage, which also is needed by the library district.
Yeah. So it's, we're recording this now. It's kind of mid-June. So where are we at since February when it started?
Well, it's been a very wet spring, as everyone knows, and that has provided some challenges for keeping the project on schedule. And although certain elements are behind, the ultimate finish date is still targeted to be late October, early November.
Wow.
But the children's wing, this 15,000 square foot wing, is scheduled to be completed by the end of August.
That's like 2 months.
It is 2 months, yes.
Wow.
And so for those folks who have been at Aspen, the steel beams are all up. We'll start being enclosed very shortly, and then work on the interior will proceed. At the end of August, work will begin on the interior of the existing building. And I should mention, and I should have mentioned at the outset, is that the construction project is comprised of 2 specific things. One is the new addition that will be constructed, but the other will be some of these, as I mentioned, some of these enhancements, and that's kind of part 2 of the overall project. So when I talk about the expanded study rooms and after school areas, that is part 2 of the construction project, which will begin at the end of August. So when the new building is open, we will have all of our library services from the existing building move over to the new building, at which time the existing building will be closed off so we can do some of these enhancements.
Okay. Almost like a full gut and remodel of the existing building.
It will be a gut of certain areas. I mean, obviously, with the building as new as this, it's in great shape.
Yes.
But temporary operations will occur in the new building for 2 months from late August to late October, and then the project will conclude around Halloween.
They work fast.
They do. Yes, I'm glad I'm not doing it. Yeah, yeah.
You talked about how the building itself is actually relatively new. You were here back when the building was originally constructed.
Yes.
You said it was about 8 to 10 years ago. I can't.
Yes, it was July of 2010.
Okay.
It opened.
Yeah. So I was just curious to ask you, like, what's something that maybe that you or maybe we as a library learned from that original construction project that we are now applying to this project?
Yeah, a couple things. One of the most notable things, and probably one that is least noticeable to anyone other than perhaps administration and board, is that we changed the model of the construction. So back when Aspen was constructed, we built that building under a general contractor model in which the library as a public body went out to bid and asked general contractors to provide us with a cost of how much it would be to construct this building. The general contractor would then make all these contracts with individual trades, and then the library would just pay one lump sum to the general contractor and basically would act on the library's behalf. And we were very satisfied with the general contractor of that building. So there was no reason to change other than we've heard such good things about another model, and that is the construction management model. And so what the construction management model does is that we as a library, the board selects a professional construction management firm. It's not by lowest qualified bidder. We can, as a professional service, go out and select a construction management firm to manage the construction project on the library's behalf. We then, as a library, take bids for all the various contractors. So there are about 29 separate contracts with this project. So it goes anywhere from masonry to painting to electrical to plumbing. And you get better pricing that way.
Yeah.
So the construction manager acts on the library's behalf, and that's proven to be a very worthwhile decision, I think, by the board to go this direction.
Yeah. So it seems almost like, if I'm kind of just interpreting it correctly, we're sort of using this manager to then really get the best bids we can on every piece of the construction project, as opposed to just finding a contractor that you pay the lump sum to and they kind of take everything from there.
That's exactly right. And so the library, so the key here is that when it goes out to bid for all these separate trades, is that in some cases the lowest bid is not the most qualified.
Sure,
and that's why you have your construction manager to say, this is why this bid, even though it's lowest, is not the most qualified.
Sure,
and so therefore you get the best contractor for the best price.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And I'll also say, Nate, that what you mentioned, what did we learn from the project 10 years ago? And as folks who have been in the library district for a long time will know, is that in addition to the Aspen construction, we had the renovation at the Cook Park Library in Libertyville.
Yeah.
And we had temporary services operate out of a storefront in downtown Libertyville while the existing building in Libertyville was undergoing renovation. So we did learn a lot about how to provide temporary services and the logistics involved with that. And so that is going to come a long way to helping us provide temporary services during this 2-month period in which all library operations will occur in the newly constructed building.
Yeah, that's a good point, though, that you're basically, you have a construction site right next to where everybody's still trying to use a library. And I've been there when the jackhammers are going. But it seems like patrons, they're not really annoyed by it. It's just exciting, actually, to kind of hear the construction and to see it actually unfold before your eyes. Yeah,
I think the only truly annoying thing I think of the project was early on when they were putting into the ground these shorings.
The pile driver.
The pile drivers, which wasn't necessarily loud, but it created a vibration that was very unsettling. And luckily that was just for a few days. But I know that the times that I've been over there, it's great to look out onto the site. It's an extremely visible construction site from the windows there at Aspen. So for someone like me who's obviously I have a vested interest in the project, but I'm just personally interested in all the construction vehicles and the personnel on site. It's just great. It's a great way to be distracted easily from whatever work you have in front of you.
And it's been, you should see the kids there too. Yep. The little lookout place that we built it's been really heavily populated. So generally speaking, what has the response that you've received been from the community so far?
It's been generally very good. We had a family event a few weeks ago to mark the halfway point of the construction project, in which we had a steel beam that's going to actually be used in the construction of the building, laid out for kids to sign their names and for families to write a message. And I think it's kind of cool that a beam can go up and a kid can go up and say, my name is on that beam in the new library edition. So, it's been gratifying to get feedback from the public. And at times people have asked, questions, as they rightly should, about things that they're curious about or concerned about. We had some comments regarding the removal of a couple trees, and we try to minimize the number of trees that have been removed for this project. But I can assure you that for any tree that's been removed, we are replacing it with a tree on site elsewhere.
Yeah.
But by and large, the public response has been very positive.
Good. Now, we have received a few questions. I noticed when you were talking about the new features of the library, one thing you didn't mention was a drive-up window, which we have here at the Cook Park Library. It's heavily used here. So there isn't one planned for the new building. Would you like to speak to that at all?
Sure. So when we started the planning process for what sort of improvements were needed at Aspen, the drive-up window was one of those items, along with 24 other things.
Sure.
And in the end, we had to prioritize the types of projects that we could afford, and the drive-up window ultimately was too expensive to undertake without sacrificing these other projects. And so things like a dedicated area for our after-school kids or a high school area probably would have been cut out if we had gone the drive-up route. And that's not to say that can't be done in the future, but with a budget that we had to adhere to, a number of things just simply got left on the cutting room floor, as it were.
Yeah.
This was
like any project.
And this was one of them. But certainly the infrastructure is there and in place for future modification for this.
So it's not like once the project's done, a drive-up window could never be at Aspen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
Different kind of question here. So lately, me and my wife have been watching a lot of HGTV, a lot of Flip or Flop, these home remodeling shows. So I feel like I'm sort of like a sofa expert on home remodels at this point. So what they always talk about when they do these home remodels are the little details or the features in the remodels that are going to sell the home to the potential buyers. They could be, like extra large windows, custom backsplash, that kind of stuff. So I was just curious if you could name something that's, to you at least, a little detail of the project that you're excited about and that you think is going to give patrons that little extra wow factor when they first walk into the new building.
Yeah, well, a couple things. And I'm not sure if this one is small, but I think people are going to realize just how much natural light is apparent with the new addition, because as originally designed, the Aspen building was slated to go immediately east of where the tallest windows are in the building. And that would have resulted in less natural light coming in to where the existing building is. Our architects were able to design it so that it maximizes the amount of window space for everybody, not only in the new children's area, but it continues that natural light for the existing building as well. And then as far as another, and I'm not sure if this is a wow factor, but maybe for me it is that our goal is for every table to have a tabletop charger and USB charger for everyone's personal devices. And that's for USB and USB-C, which is
where things are going. Yeah.
Where things are going. And so the goal is for all new tables to have this available, and then we're going to modify our existing tables to have this included. So virtually everybody will have access to a charging station at the table that they're sitting at.
Another thing that happened since our last episode is kind of more of a village thing, but they approved a big kindergarten center kind of in between what is the Sullivan Center, which is our current neighbor, and our building, and they have officially broken ground on that, so people who come by can actually see them working there as well. It's quite the construction area at this point.
It really is, yeah.
But do you anticipate that new building impacting services at all, or have you been in contact with the village about what that's going to look like having that right there?
Sure. Well, as a matter of fact, the village, the Park District schools and the library had been working for years on ultimately what is shaping up to be a great campus-like feel for both the library, the Park District, and the school. So the new kindergarten is called the Hawthorne School for Young Learners. And so this will involve the relocation of most kindergarten classrooms from around the district housed in one location. That frees up space in their other buildings. The priority of the village was to ensure that the development of that building, which is going to be constructed on Park District property, as you said, attached to the Sullivan Center, was to ensure that development occurs in a manner that takes advantage of shared efficiencies and make sure that the design is complementary of each other. And so Having these four entities working together, I think, is a great example of how well government in Vernon Hills works.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to the great leadership of administrators at Village Hall in Vernon Hills. There will be additional parking spaces required for the library's construction. The schools will also need parking for their staff, so that we are sharing in the expenses of this additional parking lot, which not only saves our mutual taxpayers money, it also preserves green space, so that we're not devoting this entire area to parking, because the parking needs for both the school and the library occur at different times, so that we can have this shared parking lot. But in terms of your question, I'll get around to answering how it affects library services. With the all-kindergarten building opening up by August of 2020, we do anticipate those students coming over with their teachers to utilize the library's collection. We have a great collection of materials for all ages, of course, but I think at Aspen it's especially going to be well suited for early learners, those kids who are just starting to read and become acclimated with books.
That's great. And it's nice because especially if you go there now and how much it does look like a construction site, it's nice to just kind of have that assurance that there is an emphasis on green space still.
Definitely. And the village has driven that point home.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just talk a little bit more about your role, I guess, as director in all of this. And the last time we talked, you were more in sort of the planning phase, I guess, and getting this thing off the ground. But I was just curious to ask you how your job has changed now since breaking ground. And then you've got the construction manager, so that I'm assuming means you just get to kind of kick back and relax, right?
Totally. Yeah, I just call him the end of the day and say, how did it go today? So we work with the construction managers to keep the project on schedule and within budget. And within the project budget, there's what's called a contingency line item. And that contingency line item includes monies for unforeseen expenses. So we have a contract with all these 29 different trades for the project as it was envisioned and anticipated to be by the architects and the construction managers. As the construction process goes along, there are unforeseen expenses that need to be paid for outside of the originally approved contract that the board approved. And so those are called change orders. And so it is my job, along with the management team, to review these change orders and to take these to the library board of trustees for their formal approval so that the project can continue. And I will say that the change orders up till now have not been significant and not unexpected, I would add, too.
Okay.
So,
do you have an example of what a change order would look like or has looked like so far?
Yes.
Something that wasn't. I'm thinking, like, again, going back to the sort of the HGTV home remodeling shows, this is always the moment when the contractor calls them and says, we got a problem here.
Exactly. And I must say that there are occasions in which I do get those types of phone calls, and perhaps they're a little bit embellished. I'll think of a real simple one that happened recently, is that on the interior side, in which we're converting a storage area into office space. Once this space was open, it was realized that a HVAC duct, a heating and air conditioning duct, was emitting way too much noise for the relocated staff area. And this was beyond white noise. This was like industrial noise. Yeah. And so this was not anticipated at the time of the construction drawings. And so a change order was in place to put in sound dampening equipment in order to dramatically reduce that noise, so that this would be an appropriate office environment.
Sure.
So that's just one of a number of examples.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that my managers and I are working on are the logistics associated with moving those temporary library operations into the new building while the existing building undergoes those improvements and renovations. So that's certainly something that wasn't something that I was doing back in January.
Yeah. So what's been the most rewarding part for you as director during this project so far? And conversely speaking, what's been the most stressful?
Sure.
The one that keeps you up at night, I guess.
Yeah. I think the most rewarding one has been the process of design. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in this process is don't set your sights on what you want the design to look like, but express what the problem is and what you want to see remedied. You start with an example of a need for an expanded quiet reading space. So we knew that we needed to expand that and to improve the aesthetics of it. But from day one, I think my management team and I were thinking, where on that west side of the building are we going to locate this? Because that's where it currently is. And we didn't envision that we could think elsewhere. And it helped that we had a design team and also some very creative managers who thought, let's move it out to where the children's area currently is and take advantage of those views of the green space. So that was an example where we identified a need, came up with what we thought was an initial solution, but ended up with a solution that far exceeded what we envisioned. As far as stresses, I think when it seemed to not stop raining day and night a month or so ago, it seemed as if the project was going to get significantly behind schedule. And I will say that certain elements are still behind schedule, but the important thing is that our construction management team readjusted it so that they could do more interior work earlier than usual, so that we're still holding to that late October finish date. And so while I wouldn't say it kept me up at night, it certainly caused some stressful moments.
A little nervous.
A little nervous, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I think you've gone into a lot of detail about the project and what it's looking like right now and where it's going. But if listeners want to keep up to date with the progress, we're talking a lot about what the library is going to look like, but maybe even get some visuals to go with that. Where can they go to find that information?
Sure. One of the great spots they can go is just follow us on Facebook. I know our communications team posts updates regularly to Facebook as well as Twitter. But also our website, cooklib.org/Aspen. Has an overview of the project itself, as well as some architectural renderings, some actual construction photos, and a time-lapse video of the project as well. So cooklib.org/Aspen will give you everything you need to know. And I think one of the great things about this project is that you can just stop by Aspen and take a look yourself.
Yeah.
Because the east windows afford you a great view of exactly what's going on. And it's one thing to see it on paper. It's one thing to listen to me on a podcast. It's another thing to just go out there and take a look yourself.
See it
it's
come
very
to life.
Visible.
Yeah. And actually at Aspen in the lobby area, we've got the boards that actually have the renderings of what the building's going to look like. Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yep. So folks can see where the various improvements are located and get a good view of that.
Great. And while I got you here, Dave, we ask all of our guests this as sort of our last question. Of course, we have to ask, what have you been reading lately? Or what have you been sort of into? Movies, music, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I'm a big audiobook listener, as you know. And like everyone else here on staff, I recently read the library book by Susan Orlean.
Oh, yeah.
Which chronicled the 1986 Los Angeles Public Library fire. And it follows that story, but I think it also does a great job of exploring the library culture in terms of how libraries fit in our society. For those of us on the inside of the business, I think the book spoke to us very nicely, but in a way I think they would be very, very easily grasped by anyone reading the book. And Susan Orlean just lends a great voice to that and is actually the narrator of the audiobook, I might add.
Yeah.
The other book that I've recently finished is called American Prison, and it's by a journalist by the name of Shane Bauer, who was embedded into a for-profit prison in Louisiana and exposed some of the shortcomings and dangerous conditions associated with prisons that don't operate without direct government oversight.
Yeah.
And it opened my eyes into some of the things that we as society should be looking at in terms of what we do when we put costs above safety in terms of providing prisons to the public. And it was an eye-opening book. It was from 2018.
Okay, yeah.
And we do have it in the library collection, at least in print format, and I believe I listened to it as an audiobook from one of our digital providers too. So highly recommend that book. And, of course, I'm always listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about 99% Invisible, which is
great
one of my favorite ones.
So. A good go-to. Yeah, always dependable.
Yeah. It is, and I will say that it started out as an architectural podcast, and I turned our design team, our architects from Product Architecture, onto this podcast.
They hadn't even heard of it? Or?
They had not heard of
it,
believe it or not. So they're enjoying the ones that deal with architecture, and it does expand out beyond that. But at its heart, it's a design-themed podcast, which you may think doesn't translate well on a podcast, but it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it was from a couple years ago, but I still always think about their episode on designing flags.
Yes.
Every time I see a state flag or a national flag, it's just a fascinating thing to even just think about that you wouldn't normally pay any attention to.
Well, and therefore the name of the podcast.
Exactly.
And
Invisible.
And the host, Roman Mars, is an infrastructure geek like myself. So I'm always interested in things like subways and sewage systems and drainage systems.
Wait. So with the Susan Orlean book.
It's called The Library Book.
And 99% Invisible. Yeah. Even in your downtime, you're basically marrying your role as library director.
I need this project to end. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to give us this update. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nate. Really enjoyed it.
All right, so Dave already went over all of the different ways that you as a listener can get caught up with the updates on the Aspen expansion. But generally speaking, there's a lot of ways that you can keep up with what's going on at the library. One of those ways is our blog, Shelf Life, where we regularly post book recommendations, genealogy tips, local history stories, and a whole lot more. That blog can be found at shelflife.cooklib.org. Of course, while you're on the library's website, you can use our catalog to search for any books, movies, music, articles, or really anything that you need to give yourself something to discover and occupy your mind for these summer months. If you ever want to get in touch with us here at the podcast, you can reach us anytime. Talk to us on Twitter at Cook Library is our handle, or feel free to send us an email. Send those messages to webmaster@cooklib.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please spread the word. Continue to share this podcast and let people know that they can catch future episodes by subscribing to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast in Apple Podcasts or really anywhere that people like to get podcasts. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.